Like Katie, I cannot play guitar, unfortunately. So I'm going to read some short stories. So, this first one is called 10 Days That Shook the World. The Lesser Planets Heritage Council is proud to present an exhibition of all that remains of the planet Earth. Although the site has been cleared for construction, the landowners have agreed a chronal donation of 10 days from life on Earth. We were given the exclusive pick of days from Earth's history, from those remaining after the private buyer's auction. A fully interactive experience, visitors can enter each day. The curators have carefully chosen the following days from Earth's history. Day 1, a single-celled organism splits into 2. Day 2, a fish with the beginnings of stumpy legs flops out of the sea onto a beach. Day 3, Tyrannosaurus versus Triceratops. Day 4, dust clouds start to clear after the meteorite's impact. Day 5, the third snow of the period that later inhabitants called the Ice Age. Day 6, a hairy pink biped discovers fire and gets the planet's first burnt finger. This day contains language that may offend more sensitive visitors. Day 7, a volcano erupts. Please remain within the viewing pod at all times. Exemptions are only allowed for natives of Helios 2. Day 8, a human has an idea when a frog is hit by lightning. Easily offended sentients should be warned an amphibian was harmed. Day 9, on the anniversary of the event, several of the few remaining human survivors are eaten by giant insects. Day 10, the Hive Global Treasury defaults on its loans to the Intergalactic Monetary Committee and the planet Earth is repossessed and demolished. This exhibition will last for 4 standard weeks at the Minor Planets Heritage Museum, after which all 10 days will be archived to make space for the next exhibit, 10 Particles of Dust from Mars. I'll now try to follow the end of the world. So I'm going to come right back to Leith. This is one I wrote for the Leith Festival Story Slam last year. I was given the theme of On the Foot of the Walk, and I had to do it in 100 words, and I took it much too literally. A remarkable beast appeared in Leith one day, a pony-sized creature that resembled a foot. No one knew where it came from, why, or how. Children loved to play with the foot of the walk, riding it up and down Leith Walk. Artists would paint its toenails and decorate the skin with henna tattoos. The foot was a hero, stepping between angry drunks, kicking muggers' arses. One day, as mysteriously as it had come, it went away. That is how the foot of the walk got its name, in memory of where this fantastic beastie had first appeared. This next one, I'm going to read it in the first person, so it will sound like it's me, but this is not from my individual experience. This is from the point of view of an imaginary character who is evil. The Chancellor's Tale. This simply will not do. As Chancellor and Chief Advisor to King Colin, it is my hand that must guide our nation's future. It is my responsibility to ensure this kingdom has any future. I have to look ahead. The king is old and infirm. It is such a shame he never had a son, a young boy who I could tutor in the ways of statecraft, as I did the king. We must look to the princess to marry a suitable prince, a key part of my strategy to forge crucial alliances for trade and mutual defence. Prince Ham of nearby Schweinberg would be perfect. Weak-willed and idle, he would be an obedient king. Prince Main of Callan would be less pliable, but as a young brute who loves drinking, fighting and whoring, he would be distracted well enough to allow the professionals, me, to continue to guide this land. Does the princess take any interest in these eligible princes? She does not. She enjoys her own company, long walks, dreaming. She has taken a frog into her chamber. Apparently, he is of royal blood, but this cannot be verified. The frog went into her room, and the next morning, a man came out. I protested in the most strongest terms. A supernatural transformation, if that's what it was, is no basis to select the next ruler of our land. My close ally, the Archbishop, was incensed and denounced him that he should be burned as a witch. Inexplicably, the King and Queen are fond of the young chap, even talking of breaking with the mainstream church if the Archbishop blocks the marriage. No, this will not do. I learned that the Chamberlain of Trollstadt has recently passed away. Perhaps I could win his position if my uncle would put in a good word. Coincidentally, and this happens a lot in this particular world, the king of that land is sick and there is no male heir. However, quite prudently, the princess of that land has been locked away in a tall tower with only her hobby of growing her hair to improbable lengths to entertain her. There I should be able to influence her to accept an appropriate suitor. What could possibly go wrong? This next one is following from a story by Franz Kafka, The Metamorphosis. It follows it so closely we had to get the translator's permission to get it published. That's how close it is. But I was thinking, there are worse things than being a man waking up as a giant beetle. I was thinking it would actually be worse if it was the other way round. As Masma Garega awoke one morning, head filled with static, he found himself transformed in his nest of rotting food into a tiny man. The objects in this nest dug into his exposed raw body. He was lying on his soft, unshelled back, and when he lifted his head a little, he could see his flabby pink belly covered in wiry hairs. His legs were pitifully few. 2 upper body, 2 lower body on either side, with a further, much smaller appendage in the middle. What was that even for? The legs lay heavy and only moved with great strain and then slowly. He did not know what dreams were, but his mind reeled in pain at his condition. He had no shell, he was horribly mutilated, with only 4, perhaps 5 legs, weak, broken prey. The morsels that he had collected to eat later, a rotting apple, pieces of mouldy bread, blackened banana skins, now disgusted his senses, brought his gorge rising up his throat. He lost control and vomited into the nest, splattering down his body. Masma Garega's eyes turned to the opening of the nest and the darkened sky. He was still indoors. In a larger structure, inhabited by giants he had been indifferent to when he was in his strong, armoured body. Now he feared everything. His whole body felt cold, it shivered, covered in tiny bumps, hairs standing on end. He wanted to fly out of his nest, but his back was bare, no wings, and the fleshy limbs were of no use. However he strained, he could not leave the floor, could not fly. With the exertion, he felt a sharp pain in his side he had not experienced before. What an exhausting existence he'd had as a bug, day in, day out. Constant travelling here and there, buffeted by winds, fights with rivals, what scraps he could find lying around. Rot take it all. He felt a raw itching on his belly. Slowly he pushed up on his back, nearer the top of the nest, so he could lift his head more easily, identified the itching place which was surrounded by many sore red spots, the nature of which he could not understand, and made to touch it with one of his upper legs, but drew back immediately, for the rough contact of fingernails on soft raw skin made a shudder run through him. There was a rustling movement on the nest's opening, and a beetle's mouth, shining eyes and segmented legs loomed over him. Masma Garega recognised her. She had hatched from an egg of the same brood as him. She advanced, mandibles working, antenna twitching. He could not understand her clicking anymore, but it seemed clear she saw him as prey. A whining noise was all that escaped his own throat. He reared up on his bottom 2 limbs, then stumbled over into the revolting food and slipped into his own vomit. The beetle backed away from him, turned her back. He was not even prey. He wiped his vomit-smeared mouth with an upper leg, then walked over the rotting food. His lower feet hurt as they walked on a surface by turns, scratchy, spongy and slimy. He crawled out of the nest on all fours. He was in a large room, but the scene that dominated the room was a platform. In the far distance, he could see the sky through a window. Only by climbing up to the platform would he be able to reach it, if only he could still fly. The platform was mounted on large, tree-like legs. McGregor made many clumsy attempts to climb it, repeatedly bruising his soft body until he found himself at the top. There he felt the ground beneath him give way, and looking up, saw he was in the shadow of a gigantic beetle. It rocked towards him. He tried to run but only collapsed. His throat was raw with screaming, his eyes streaming with hot water as the giant beetle roared onto him, crushing the life out of his tiny fleshy body. And so the reeling man's mind that inhabited the body of the giant beetle had no way of returning to humanity. The switch was irreversible. Thank you. And we've had the end of the world, and I was writing a series of ends of the world, but they before 2020, one of which was a pandemic. So, and another one was an energy crisis. I just stopped. However, I thought, no, I'm going to write ends of the world so implausible they can definitely not happen. And if they do, I would almost have to embrace it. And so it's called Day of the Kaiju. The media called them Kaiju. Why invent a new term when the perfect name already existed? Of course, the creators of Godzilla and Rodan had probably never anticipated that anything like their creations would ever emerge into physical reality. Yet there they were. All over the globe, striding out of the sea, descending from the heavens, monstrous, irradiated giant animals. The best theory the scientists had come up with was that it was a result of excessive nuclear testing. While nuclear tests were always kept well clear of areas inhabited by people, there had been no such consideration for other life forms, and so they came. Animals as tall as skyscrapers, bugs as big as bendy buses, and they loved to fight each other, with no regard for the people or buildings that got in their way. They also loved to eat people and breathe fire. Australia was the first to be devastated, starting with a battle between a gigantic emu and wallaby, which toppled the Sydney Opera House while tiny tourists fled. But there were soon reports from all over the world of giant, indigenous monsters fighting each other, knocking buildings over, chasing people. Scotland had been mercifully free of the kaiju up to now, Jack reflected, sauntering along Leith Walk. He thanked his lucky stars he was here, not in Australia, which had always been beset by giant spiders, even at the best of times. The ground shook, rubbish toppled from the nearby bin. He looked up and found that he was not in the shadow of a building as he had thought, but it was a seagull with a wingspan 50 foot wide, closing in with a sound like rushing wind. Seagulls had always been a nuisance in Leith, but this was something else. Jack swung his backpack full of shopping at the gull, batting it away. It squawked so loudly Jack's ears hurt, a backdraft from the wings knocked him over. The gull swooped away, then came in for another pass. Jack ran behind an overflowing, industrial-sized metal wheel bin. The gull dove at him. The reek of the week's-old rubbish was suddenly overpowered by the musk of damp dog, as a massive sheepdog barreled past him into the oversized gull. Jack ran, thanking her God. He didn't admit to believing in it at all. He escaped into a side alley too small for either creature and kept running until he made it to his block of flats. The kaiju kept on coming, a giant rat, a pigeon, a vast salmon attacking cargo ships. Armies battled them. In America, they actually tried nuking the beast known as Beaverzilla, but it only made it larger and angrier. The last great stand of humanity was Beaverzilla versus Mecha Beaverzilla. But human ingenuity was no match for the nuclear food theory of nature this time. The kaiju were big, too powerful, and had no regard for their environment, flattening cities, crushing people. There was no kaiju with confidence, no Godzilla to champion humanity in this world. For his part, Jack survived well. He was one of the last to die in Scotland. He did not see the kaiju dog or seagull again, but finally died fending off a gigantic chigger in Tesco car park. So it went, the world did not end, but humanity became prey, supplanted by a new, far deadlier species. Without humanity, nature, including the kaiju, thrived. Cities disappeared into vast forests, which grew as tall as the prodigious kaiju, and the world kept turning.